So by now we're all aware of the fact that Henry VIII had 6 wives, but can you tell me how many wives Ivan the Terrible had? Ivan the Terrible actually had 8 wives. And instead of the catchy divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, it would be more something like poisoned, 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 imprisoned, murdered, imprisoned, drowned, survived. And the first of these unfortunate 8 was none other than Anastasia Romanovna. Anastasia was chosen amongst a large numbers of daughters from noble families. She was married to Ivan around the age of 17, and she ended up fathering 6 children with him. And Ivan absolutely doted upon her. However, she died in the summer of 1560, supposedly from illness, although some people, Ivan especially, suspected poisoning. As a result, Ivan took several of the boyars at court that he suspected and had them tortured and or executed. And what's especially fascinating is that towards the end of the 20th century to the beginning of the 21st century, forensic scientists were running tests on her remains. And by neutron activation analysis, they were able to conclude that Anastasia did actually die of poisoning, of mercury poisoning specifically. However, this poisoning wouldn't have most likely been a malicious, intentional poisoning. It was probably poisoning due to mercury used as a medical treatment. When it came to Ivan, though, his grief was immeasurable. His temperament completely changed. A lot of people said that the Tsar himself would credit his gruesome actions and rage that we would see in the future to the loss of his dear wife, and that if she hadn't passed, then he wouldn't have taken those actions. So what do you think? And don't forget to tune into part 2 when we talk about Maria Temrykovna, one of Ivan the Terrible's most unpopular brides. Welcome back to The Real Housewives of Ivan the Terrible, consistently making Henry VIII's love life look like an episode of Little House on the Prairie. So according to popular legend, Anastasia Romanovna had made Ivan the Terrible promise on her deathbed that he would not marry a pagan. And this was a promise that Ivan honored for a year and 2 weeks, and then broke after he met Maria Temrykovna. They say that Ivan was so overcome with her beauty that he decided to marry her immediately. And then she was eventually baptized into the Russian Orthodox Church. However, Ivan would eventually come to regret this rather hasty decision, because Maria apparently didn't make any efforts to assimilate to the court lifestyle. She was not well educated, she was illiterate, and she was considered generally to have poor manners. She was also rather spiteful and may have even inspired Ivan to found the Oprichniki, who were essentially a large corps that swore allegiance to the Tsar. They were said to terrorize the populations of the Tsar's territory by persecuting the Tsar's enemies, and to strike fear into the hearts of the people by putting dog or wolf heads on their saddles. Back to Maria, she had 1 son with Ivan, but the child didn't survive infancy. And then at the age of 25, Maria died quite suddenly. Some people say it was illness, but it's most commonly accepted that she died of poisoning. Some people even suspect that Ivan himself was responsible for poisoning her. But it's likely just a theory because once again, Ivan had the people that he suspected tortured and executed. So what do you think? And don't forget to tune to part 3 where we talk about Marfa Sobakina, who is the ill-fated wife of 16 days. Welcome back to The Bachelor, Ivan the Terrible edition. And yes, I'm saying Ivan this time for the people in my comments that corrected me, but only the ones that respectfully corrected me. If your comment looked like this, then this is not for you. So after the death of Maria, Ivan's court held another bridal pageant, so to speak, like they did with Ivan's first wife. However, it's very much worth bearing in mind that some of the details about the bridal pageant could possibly be derived from a dramatic play called The Tsar's Bride by Lev May, and there's also an opera by the same name by Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. And the winner of that bridal pageant ended up being Marfa Sobakina. But only a matter of days after her selection, she started to fall ill. She was losing lots of weight and she was having trouble standing, but she still managed to make it to the wedding, and she and Ivan were married on the 28th of October 1571. However, Marfa would die only 16 days into the marriage. Again, most people suspected poisoning, although it's likely that Marfa's mother prepared some elixirs or tinctures or potions for her that were meant to boost her fertility that may have unknowingly poisoned her. Ivan, however, was infuriated. His palace is supposed to be a place where he's surrounded by loyal members of court. And I'm sure it brought up lots of memories of the death of his first wife, Anastasia. So Ivan did what he did best, which was having several of his subjects tortured and executed. And this included his former brother-in-law from his second marriage, Mikhail Temryuk. So what do you think? And don't forget to hang around for part 4, where we discuss Anna Koltovskaya, who was the first of Ivan the Terrible's wives to be imprisoned in a convent.
Hello all, I've basically been on death's doorstep, but nothing's gonna stop me from talking about the wives of Ivan the Terrible. Except maybe the ghost of Ivan himself, which I'm pretty sure is trying to kill me at this point. But this week, a hot new bombshell enters the villa. I've lived in the UK for 3 years, and that was the best accent I could come up with for some reason. So after the death of his third wife, Marfa Sobakina, Ivan actually was having a bit of difficulty securing a third marriage because the Russian Orthodox Church would not allow a fourth marriage. And Ivan kind of pulled Henry VIII trying to get rid of Anne of Cleves by claiming that his marriage to Marfa had not been consummated because she died so quickly into the marriage. Anne of Cleves didn't die, but Henry was able to get out of the marriage by saying that he hadn't consummated the marriage with Anne. Anyway, back to Ivan. So Ivan didn't wait for a blessing and he went ahead and got married anyway. He married the daughter of a courtier, Anna Kotovskaya, on April 29th, 1572. Then he went back to the clergy and essentially gave a very tear-inspiring poetic speech, basically pleading for his marriage, and eventually was just given the thumbs up. There were a couple catches, either do some repentance. He was told that he wasn't allowed to attend church until Easter, and then he had to spend a year amongst the penitents and a year amongst common Christians. So Ivan honeymooned with his new wife in Novgorod, which is kind of interesting because 2 years earlier, Novgorod was actually invaded by Ivan. Not even just invaded, like straight up massacred, as in the massacre of Novgorod. But after 2 years of marriage, Anna was still not pregnant, so Ivan had her put away in a convent, which was basically a prison sentence because it was somewhat isolated but still relatively within the Tsar's control. We'll see this popping up a lot throughout Russian history. Peter the Great did this to his sister, did it to one of his ex-lovers. Elizaveta and Catherine the Great would also have this impending threat of being imprisoned in a convent sort of held over them. When she was put away into this monastery, Anna took the name Daria. What's interesting is that even though she was put away into this monastery, she still outlived Ivan. Honestly, good for you, girly. So what do you think? Don't forget to tune in next time where we talk about Anna Vasilchikova, Ivan's bride who disappeared in mysterious circumstances.
Hello all, I am back. I am finally starting to recover, and for an extra added measure of safety, I have flown from the UK to the US, not only to escape Ivan, but to enjoy a lovely Christmas with my family. So without further ado, let's dig into the next wife of Ivan the Terrible and continue this series in which the dumpster fire that is Ivan's love life continues to explode until it eventually encompasses the earth. Up next, Ivan married Anna Vasilchikova. And the sad thing is we actually know very little about her background. So Anna was married to Ivan in 1575. And again, this wedding took place without any ecclesiastical blessing from the Russian Orthodox Church. But within about a year of their marriage, Ivan eventually repudiated her and had her made a nun in a monastery. And after that, the trail goes cold. We know that she dies sometime between 1576 to 1577, but we don't really know for certain what happened. Naturally, there's been speculation that Ivan played a role in her death, because with the reputation that Ivan has at this point, you could pretty much point to him for anything, and people would say like, yeah, that makes sense. Anna disappeared. Ivan probably had something to do with it. There was a village burned down nearby. Somebody should probably check what Ivan was doing at the time. Gas prices are getting absolutely out of control. Thanks, Ivan. So what do you think? And that does it for this episode on the wives of Ivan the Terrible. Don't forget to tune in for next episode where we talk about Vasilisa Melentieva, who may or may not have actually existed. Yeah, I bet you guys didn't think this series was going to turn into an object lesson on historical revisionism, but yeah. 2 of Ivan's wives may have actually not existed, or may have existed but never been officially married to him. And the reason people suspect this is because we have a lot of sources that only crop up around the 19th century, which is a time period that is quite famous for spreading historical myths. Think the Victorians and the Iron Maiden, or the post-Civil War South and the Lost Cause. We'll see where history and fantasy meet in the next episode of... Okay, it's a bit strange. Hello?
Доброе утро.
Hello all, I'm back, and today we're going to talk about another one of the wives of Ivan the Terrible, although this one, again, may or may not have actually been real. So before we get into this dicey history, I think we should discuss why somebody might want to tamper with history and make Ivan the Terrible look a bit more terrible. Tacking 2 more wives onto the list of Ivan the Terrible's failed marriages would be potentially helpful for the dynasty that would come after Ivan the Terrible and the Rurik's end. So after Ivan the Terrible's reign, there's sort of a struggle for power in Russia known as the Time of Troubles. And from there we see the beginning of the Romanov dynasty. And the thing is, a lot of this historical revisionism for Ivan the Terrible took place in the 19th century, particularly in the mid to late 19th century. If we look at what's happening in Russia during the time, the Romanov rulers aren't necessarily doing too hot. If you need proof, look at the way Alexander II was assassinated. To mention, in the following century, Nicholas II would face the same fate as his granddad. It might make the Romanovs look better to the public to kind of trash the dynasty that came before them. Essentially, you can say, hey, things might not be great, but look at how much worse it could have been. This especially will make a lot more sense when you consider how some artists get royal funding. Just a little something to bear in mind. And now on to Vasilisa Melentieva. So Vasilisa was either a Ukrainian or a Georgian slave. However, if Vasilisa did actually exist, she's widely accepted to have been a concubine at the court of Ivan the Terrible. And Ivan was looking for another marriage after his 5th marriage because he wanted to secure the future of the dynasty. Essentially, the more heirs you can get, the better. Some sources claim that he freed her from slavery and married her. Some people say that he was taken with her beauty and her grace, and that she was the first wife that he actually loved since his first wife, Anastasia. There are actually a few different legends about Vasilisa. Some people claim that she had a husband named Melenty Ivanov, who served in the Livonian War. Some people claim that Ivan also discovered Vasilisa having an affair with a man named Devletev, and that as punishment, he forced her to watch her lover be impaled. And then afterwards, he forced her to live in a monastery. But aside from legend, there isn't a lot of hard evidence to prove that she existed. One source by Nikolai Karamzin lists her simply as a concubine, along with Ivan's other spouses. Another work is believed to come from Alexander Sulakatezev, who happened to be a 19th century forger, so... She also featured in a play written by Alexander Ostrakovsky in 1867. So what do you think? Don't forget to tune in next time when we talk about Maria Dolgorukaya and Maria Nagaya. The first one may not have actually existed, but the second one, let's just say you're not going to want to miss out on this one. No, Ivan, I wasn't talking about your names, dude. Even if I was, people have questions. They want to know. They're just curious. It's not like, can I at least just come out? I'm gonna, I don't know, just want to make a snack or something. Just at least give me some toast. Just slide under the door. Give me like a Sudoku puzzle too. I'm getting bored in here. Welcome back to part 7 of The Wives of Ivan the Terrible. Part 7, we're going to talk about Maria Dolgorukaya. Considered the 7th wife of Ivan the Terrible, she has a short yet very chilling story. After a short courtship, the couple were unofficially married in 1580. However, Ivan shortly discovered afterward that his bride had not been a virgin prior to the marriage, and thus he ordered to have her drowned. Sounds too terrible to be true, right? Probably because this was made up. Modern historians have a lot of doubts over whether or not Maria actually existed because the only sources we have of her aren't primary sources, they're sources that pop up in the 19th century. Heck, even this picture that I had of reference for her has 19th century written all over it. And to make matters worse, most of the sources we have on her from the 19th century are actually works of fiction. Anyway, so this is a short one, but that's okay because it means we get to move on to... Ivan, what now? Wait, really? This is a letter from Ivan that he wants me to read to you all. He says, "Don't believe what people say about drowning my wives. I am the best husband. So much so that I am actually looking for another wife. I will not get poisoned or end up in a monastery." Ivan, you sent them to the monastery. Okay, I'll keep reading. "Please comment on this video if you are interested and tell me about yourself. As for me, Ivan, I like long walks by the Moskva River and enjoy a hearty bowl of stroganoff now and then." You're probably wondering to yourself, "Ivan, how do you know what stroganoff tastes like? It wasn't invented until 1871. Well, Ivan thinks that you should mind your business. Anyway, please comment down below. I'm looking forward to getting to know you all. So what do you think? And don't forget to tune into the final episode next time where we talk about Maria Nagaya, the wife of Ivan the Terrible, who not only survived him but also bore him a son. See, I said bore this time and not fathered. I accidentally said fathered last time. It was a simple mistake and then everybody had a field day. Anyway, I'll be back soon. Ivan, you can have this back. All right, everyone, we've made it. Here is the final part of my series on the wives of Ivan the Terrible. And for our final episode, we're talking about Maria Nagaya. And of all the wives of Ivan the Terrible, she has probably the most fleshed out story. She and Ivan were married in 1581, and within about a year, she gave birth to a son named Dmitri. And her success in giving Ivan a son was essentially what kept her from being banished from the court. What's funny too is during this time, Ivan was actually telling Elizabeth I of England that he would divorce Maria Nagaya in order to marry Elizabeth's relative Mary Hastings, because Ivan really wanted to curry good relationships between England and Russia. There was even a bit of speculation about Ivan wanting to marry Elizabeth at one point, but none of that came to fruition. However, in 1584, only 3 years after their marriage, Ivan the Terrible actually died. You might think this means freedom for Maria, but she's left to live off of her very young son's allowance, and she's kept under constant watch of the boyars of the court. The boyars are essentially the Russian noblemen. And bear in mind, her son Dmitri is about 3 years old at this point. And then the guardian of the new Tsar, Boris Godunov, gave Maria a small allowance and essentially forced her to leave the court. Maria's son Dmitri would eventually die around the age of 9.
Well, Dmitri most likely died of a seizure,
But a rumor spread that this was a more politically motivated murder. And Maria and her family actually chose to support this rumor, and they also supported a riot against the boyars. As a result, her family members, mainly her brothers, were imprisoned, and she herself was forced to join a monastery. Then, somebody who would go down in history known as the false Dmitri I claimed that Maria had helped him escape assassination and flee to Poland. But take note of the fact that I said the false Dmitri I, because there's 3 false Dmitris. We're gonna keep on track right now with the first false Dmitri. Boris Godunov then summoned Maria back to court and asked her if she had met with the false Dmitri, which she promptly denied.
but then the false Dmitri eventually rose to power in 1605. And it was then that she recognized this false Dmitri as her son, and then he thus freed her and her family. I think she knew that he wasn't actually her son, but she knew that would be the best move to acknowledge him as such in order to free herself and her family.
And she was also reinstated after this. So out of the Ivan the Terrible, poisoned, imprisoned, murdered, imprisoned, drowned, survived, I'd say she definitely earned the survived title. And there you have it, folks. Those are the 8 real and fake wives of Ivan the Terrible. Oh, and you can become a wife of Ivan the Terrible too. All you have to do is comment down below. It's legally binding. If you guys want more series on the false Dimitris or the time of troubles or the dynasty that would come after the Romanovs, I love studying the Romanovs, please let me know. I would love to make some more series for you guys. Bye-bye for now.